light
That's
out.
what I hope. We lost our doctor.
Okay, we have a public hearing. Would the clerk please read roll?
Mr. Amrine?
Here.
Mr. De Leon?
Here.
Mr. Ferrara?
Here.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Here.
Mr. Sidoti?
Here.
Mr. Turner?
Here.
Ms. Wallach? Here.
Mr. Kuhar and Ms. Schaefer have asked to be excused.
Move to excuse.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Look who's first. Hey, Liz.
This is a public hearing. This is a public
Oh.
hearing for the annual tax budget
Oh, that's
for
exciting.
2024, in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code Section 5705.28. We are required to approve and pass a tax budget for next year. Basically, housekeeping that has to be sent to Portage County no later than July 20th, but because it has to be approved by council by the 15th, that's why we do it all in one night.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So the Committee of the Whole, Mrs. Baker is going to talk a little bit about the City Hall update.
Good evening. I'm sorry, I tried to get it working earlier, and I don't know what I was doing. That's why I'm not in IT. But we are here. We are continuing to move along and progress really excitedly. In front of you, you guys have a little bit of a packet in front of you. So you'll note that that is like a picture facing council chambers, as if we were in the parking lot looking at that window that will overlook your council chambers there in the center. And then right below that, you can kind of see where those walls are and where the main entrance is going to be. To the left in those pictures is looking from the second floor down to council chambers. So if you remember, we also have a window on that second floor that we'll be able to visualize down below there. So you can kind of see on that bottom picture is when the main floor was poured, and then the picture right above that is when the upper dais, the 6 inches, were poured and the walkway was installed. While the pictures are wet, it will not be wet when we are done. We just don't have windows in. So it rained, which we were thankful for the rain, but it does look a little wet. But again, that is standing in council chambers as if you just came through the door, looking to the left, which would be to the east where the parking lot is and the window is up high. And then the bottom picture there is, again, standing in the corner to the right would be Water Street and that large window there. So it's really coming along. It's starting to look like something, so it's pretty exciting. On the second page, we can flip to that, and these are just some pictures on the inside. So we have a lot going on right now. All of our steel framing is going up. You can see in that first picture there is the steel framing. You can see all of the conduits put in for the electrical runs. We've got some chases coming up through the ground. That next picture is basically from the top floor looking down the hallway, so you can kind of see the doors going into offices. The third picture there is actually looking through the wall through Dave's office. That's that corner view from that floor right there. And then, of course, the metal roof, which is really coming together. If you've had a chance to look at the building, the parapets are up. We're getting ready to put the roof membrane on. We just finished that and got some final items handled with that as well, which is our insulation and all of that. On our third page, this one's really exciting to me. I know you guys are like, oh my God, I can't believe she's showing us this. But this is going to be our floating stairwell in the glass atrium area. So when we're done, this is it putting in there. So it'll actually look like it's floating. It'll be painted, but it's going to be really a cool feel. You'll be able to see it from the bottom all the way up through the top. And again, you have that glass on the inside and glass on the outside. So it's kind of really a neat feature for me that gives us that movement from, you know, basically first floor all the way up to the third floor. So kind of a cool thing. You can kind of see there that it does look like it's a little bit floating, and they'll be coming back to put the stair treads on. Our final picture there then is just that back wall. Again, you can kind of see where the parapet wall is. They're beginning to put the board out on the outside, and I was just told starting end of next week, you're going to start seeing brick come up on that outside. So we're very, very excited about all of that. We have a great IT director who has worked tirelessly to pull some things together because when we had done this prior to, there were a couple things that the prior IT person wanted to hold out from this bid and kind of make sure that we did in-house with our specific vendor. Our IT director, new Nick, picked up all up, ran with it, so we are going to actually meet with the inside vendor that will make sure that we have our microphones and all of that stuff that works in 2 weeks on Thursday with our group. So I'm really appreciative for him and really kind of jumping in to make sure that all of this is getting done. So we're still kind of on task. Again, I said, you know, coming 2024 July. I'm not going to say, oh no, we're moving it up by 6 months. We're still having a little bit of a supply chain with some things. Believe it or not, our grout and our joint is a little bit of a delay in wait time, so we can only get so much in at a time. Our colors are unique. Our sliding glass doors, the automatic doors that go in and out, those are on a wait and a hold. So it's just some crazy things. All of our doors are on the inside because we had to hurry up and order those at the beginning, so those are just waiting to come out, but until we get the building enclosed, we can't bring those out. So it's kind of a half and half kind of thing, but we're moving along. I'm very positive they're doing a great job. And I'm really excited. Also, in front of you, you have a save the date. We would like to take council through right before our next meeting. So on July 19th, if we can meet out in front at 6 o'clock, we're going to take you guys through it. We'll provide you with the hard hats and stuff. We just ask that you wear appropriate shoes. They have to have a hard sole and make sure that they're completely covered because there's exposed metal and things of that nature, so we don't want anybody to cut themselves as we're walking through the building. But the architect as well as the builder will be there, so they'll be able to answer most, if not all, of your questions. And you'll be able to actually begin to see where your offices are located and what it's going to look like when you're inside. So I'm very excited to take you guys through. It's really coming along. So if you have any questions.
Questions? Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay. Next, for the Committee of the Whole, codified ordinances, book replacement pages. Oh,
Yes, this is the second time this year I brought replacement pages to you. These are ordinances that we have passed that are either appropriate to put in our codified ordinances, or they are state laws, traffic laws, and some of the misdemeanor criminal laws that have been passed by the state that our publisher will put in our books, and we codify them that way.
okay. Questions? Anybody from the audience? Okay.
Moved authorized?
Move to authorize?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I should have said comments, but okay. Aye? Okay. Passes. All right. Community Development, Ms. Rosenberg.
Yes, we've got Bridget is going to be discussed. Sorry about my voice. Bridget's going to be coming up with our design guidelines update. Thank you. I know. I sound ridiculous. I tried to be serious. It didn't work. Okay. Bridget, go ahead.
Brenda Vaccaro with this one. Okay, I am here to collect public comment. I want to make clear, we are not asking for any authorization tonight. One of the final phases of the project, phase 3, is accepting comments. So we've had a meeting with the Architectural Review Board and took extensive comments from that. We met with the Committee on Design and Preservation and took comments from that. We've met with the Planning Commission, and we'll be having a subsequent meeting with the Planning Commission to gather more comments. There was some, when the printed copies had some where the letters get superimposed with like symbols. So just to clarify that they have a chance to look at everything, we're going to bring it back to them again. We are here tonight to gather comments from you and anyone in the public, and then once comments are complete here in the next 2 weeks, staff, basically myself and Kaylin and Tim will be, and Eric Fink will be working on editing it within the confines of the city, because a consultant does a great job of opening doors and giving us ideas of how to move forward, but the fact is staff knows the community, and we need to make sure that it reflects some of those comments. I'm going to go through a list. This is not a complete extensive list because like just the ARC board I had, I think like 8 pages. But I'm going through ones that were themes that kept coming up either through members at a same committee or across several committees. So I'm just going to give a brief summary. Some of the generalized comments were historic preservation was not addressed. The need to include the guidelines for historic properties in new constructions and define those separately and include each, more information. Adaptive reuse was not addressed. Demolition is not addressed. Focus on addressing commercial developers and business owners, not historic preservation or adaptive reuse. That was something that they wanted to see. Move the glossary to the front. Simplify terminology so that can be understood by all, because some of the terms were deemed to be really specific to just designers, and we want to make sure it's accessible to business owners and the public. Headings need to be simpler, so there was a suggestion by several to remove one of the headings and realign. Also, does not list what is discouraged, like, for example, internally lit signs. Proposed change to reduce the boundary of the existing downtown West River Overlay District to basically exclude the West River Gallagher Avenue was not supported by many. So in other words, shrinking the overlay district was something that we heard throughout most of the comments from the three groups we've met with already. And then there was one to expand the downtown to include buildings north of Fairchild Bridge on Lake Street. The photos do not align with the proposed guidelines in every instance, so evaluate the photos, and those that do not make a direct connection, remove. Guidelines for sign lighting should encourage use of energy efficient LED and control illumination levels. The regulations and guidelines for a project should be reviewed by the same board or commission. I'm going to add a caveat to that right now. That one is not something that would go forward. Regulations are governed by legislative action, by council, and then administered by staff. So the same board, for example, Planning Commission, who makes recommendations to council on such changes, would not also be one that could do the design guidelines, nor could ARC board. So I'm just going to put that out there because I put it in here, but that is the only one that I can say legally we won't be able to administer. All the others are stuff that we can work with. Are colors to be identified? This was more of a question. Are colors to be identified as allowed or prohibited? And if colors are maybe not identified by color, should they be quantified? For example, limit 3 exterior different colors or 4. There was numerous specific references to words or phrases on specific pages that are either difficult to understand, or the language needs clarity, or that needs edited, or in some cases just removed. Questions on how the Architectural Review Board's role and responsibilities will be affected. This, again, is not something we could answer with the guidelines. We need to get the guidelines done and then move that through a process of the Planning Commission and a recommendation to Council on the guidelines themselves and whether or not they should be codified in replacement of the existing codified or act as just guidelines. And then allow for online accessibility and hyperlinks, which we already have that with our zoning code. So that is something I can say that we would be doing. I did want to add that staff had comments as well, and so we'll be looking at those. And then once that draft is complete, it will be going back out to the ARC Board, Planning Commission, and then of course to Council. So at this point, you can give me comments. I will watch the video, though, because I cannot take copious notes like I did at the other meetings since I'm standing at the mic. But I will also say you can email me comments. For those of you that have not gotten through this, I'll be taking comments all summer. So if you want to just call or send them to me electronically, that would be fine. And that's all I have for right now.
All right. Are there comments by council? Yes, Garrett.
So the lighting and color of the lighting, will that be?
The lighting, I can speak to that. So with the
I think
LED,
you know I'm talking about the vape shops and the proliferation
yes,
of
yes.
smoke shops.
That is actually, so we are coming to you in August. Planning Commission has already made a recommendation to our text amendment to the zoning code. So zoning code is specificity. It's something that can be regulated. It is not arbitrary nor capricious, and it has boundaries and parameters. So we found language. Kaylin Cyrus, who's the development planner, found excellent language from the City of Greene that we presented to Planning Commission. I have several other text amendments that I'm going to be coming forth. Planning Commission agreed with staff on all those recommendations that are going to deal with those string lights as you're referring to, as well as the neon lights that are in the windows of not just vape shops. It has to be, of course, across all windows. That will be coming before you in August. I tried to get it to you in July, but the public hearing requires a 15-day notice, and when Amy and I counted the days, we were at like 12 or 13. So we could not bring it to you in July, but it will be coming in August. That is not something that would go in the guidelines with regards to whether or not that is regulated, because it's a regulation. It's going to go into the zoning code.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Robin.
Yeah, what has, as to implementation, what has the Architectural Review Board indicated thus far? I know this is an ongoing process, but what is their position so far, and how are they viewing?
Well, we met with them, and we have extensive comments from each member. Each member gave comments. We wrote them all down, and then I watched the video again and have those all in there. So those will be vetted and gone through and applied where they can be applied. So at this point, we gathered comments from them, because we're basically getting public comment, and that included from the boards and commissions. So actual implementation hasn't occurred yet, because staff will be going through basically the editing and the redevelopment of the draft, and then that will then go back to the Architectural Review Board. I can tell you with a document like this and with the extensive comments we're going to get, every single comment may not be addressed, but there are consistent themes that came through all of the public sessions that we've had so far, and those consistent themes, I can assure you, will be addressed.
Any more, Robin?
No, thank you.
Very good. Yes, Roger.
Bridget, we're using terminology again, so you lost me for a minute. We've talked about the difference between guidelines and standards here publicly. Are we saying regulations are the standards?
Yes.
Okay,
Standards,
just wanted to say.
yeah, the consultant calls them standards, we call them regulations. And I
Okay.
prefer that word because everybody knows what a regulation is, right?
Okay,
That means it's
yeah.
codified and it is law. I will say they have provided us with standards, but the first draft they sent to staff, they incorporated the standards in with the guidelines. I made them take that out because the standards, regulations need to be looked at separately. Some of the regulations they presented are in direct contradiction
Right.
to parts of our zoning code. So that needs to be vetted by the assistant law director and the planning staff. So those, if we're going to incorporate any of those, they will be going into the zoning code, and that will only be after it's been vetted by us. So that would be coming later. There will be no standards or regulations in the guidelines. They will be separate and distinct.
So that's consistent with what we did, what your department has done over the last few years in terms of updating the zoning codes.
Correct.
And so we're just being consistent in the process.
Correct.
I think people need to understand that
That's-
this isn't just a one-off, that this is all together somehow.
Correct. And I will tell you with regulations, the one thing that you have to do is, especially with zoning, every word matters, literally every word. We don't use adjacent, as I've told all of you, because we lost in court because of the application of that word, and we didn't have adjacent defined differently in the zoning code, so Webster's Dictionary of adjacent apply, even though we were applying it through basically our normal practices in a way that was slightly different than that Webster Dictionary. We lost in court because of that. The Dunkin' Donuts at 261 and 43 is there because they won that in that variance discussion. So we use abutting. We use abutting, and we define it. So every word matters. So while I appreciate what the consultant provided, regulations or what they call standards, the fact is they were not vetted in context with our zoning code. And our zoning code's connected. So if you make a change here,
Right.
you got to make
Right.
sure it doesn't change over there. So even with the consultant we used for the zoning code update, McKenna, they were good, but they only got us so far. They would bring us something, we're like, we can't use that. And then we go through and explain why. And we would point to the other parts of the section of the codes because they don't work with it every day like we do.
Well, let me see if I understand this correctly then. So we have a standard about signage, let's say.
Yes.
All right? And it's, right now, we have a regulation.
Correct.
About signage. So the guidelines are merely guidelines within that regulation. So just for ease of understanding, because
Okay.
I'm not that smart. If it's a 4x6 sign that we say you can have nothing larger than a 4x6 sign, the guidelines will kind of tell you what can be, how that sign can be designed, or what are the various options.
It'll look, right, it basically makes recommendations, guidelines are recommendations that basically on how the sign should look within that context. So for example, we have in the CD district, which is our downtown district, we have requirements for the size and the number that you can have.
Right.
But the guidelines, if they, with signs, could be something like, for example, based on the color or that type of situation. Now, I will say we can codify the lighting issue because that has been something that has been debated, like some of the questions that came up with like the LED or the illumination. So that can actually be something that we can look to actually codify and make a regulation. And then the question of can it be backlit is answered yes or no based on the law, not based on guidelines, which are just recommendations.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, I think that, and I understood it that way.
Yes.
But I think for the audience, I
Yes.
think there are sometimes, out there especially.
Yes.
There's sometimes, I think, there's confusion.
Right.
Because guidelines, I think guidelines are like law.
Right.
And they're really not. They're-
Well, I had an example, excuse me for interrupting you, but I
No,
had an
no,
example
that's
that
why
just
you're here.
happened at the Committee on Design and Preservation. So that this matter of what is the difference between a regulation and a guideline versus, and they use the word standard, but I'm going to keep using regulation. So I just happened by accident to open the guidelines. I said, let me see if I can find an example. I opened it up to solar panels, and it said, solar panels shouldn't be in the front. So I read that, and that's what's in our guidelines. But our guidelines right now are codified. Remember that they are appendices to our zoning code, say they are law. That's all it said. So somebody could have come in with a solar panel, and as long as it was in the front, they could have put as many as they want, as high as they want, ground-mounted, roof-mounted, put it in the side yards, in the backyard. They could do it in residential. They could do it in industrial. There was no regulations. So then I went to the zoning code, because we actually codified solar panels and what can be done with a solar panel when we did the zoning code update. We talk about height. We talk about where it can be. We have standards, requirements for ground-mounted, for roof-mounted. And when I read that specificity, that law that said how we're going to regulate those solar panels, to the one or two sentences we had in the guidelines, it was an aha moment for some. You cannot have something generalized codified, because it's arbitrary and capricious on how it's applied, and that puts the city in a litigious situation. Hope can confirm or deny that, but having such, where it's not applied consistently. So guidelines should be recommendations that everyone is understanding that's what we want to see, and they can have still, there can be some teeth to that, but the specificity of a regulation needs to be codified in the zoning code.
Well, the reason I broached that is I think I broached this before with you, that in school law, we had dress guidelines in our handbook, but then we had very specific.
It's a great example.
Yeah, right, yeah, it was,
Yes.
the old, the skirts couldn't be more than 3 inches above the knee and that type of stuff. But the guidelines were you should be dressed appropriately for school, there should be appropriate type, but there was specificity then in the regulations.
Correct.
We called them standards, but same thing.
Exactly.
So is that?
That's exactly the same.
That's the example I've been using
Yes.
with people to try to understand that.
That's a perfect analogy.
And I understand it. They don't work with it every day like
Right.
you do and
Right.
other people, so.
Right.
Thank
And
you.
I think, too, with the guidelines, because they're codified and the way that was done, they are right now a requirement, right? Because we've actually made them law as part of our zoning code. But it doesn't have that specificity, so the application of that law is not consistent.
Right,
And therein lies our challenge.
correct. Okay. Thank you.
Tracy?
I'm kind of confused on that, so I'm going to ask again. We have design guidelines to guide people on what they want to do, but if they don't do the guidelines, then if it's not codified, that doesn't matter then.
No, there are communities that have guidelines that you can basically say that they have a certificate of appropriateness for something, but the guidelines should not be part of the zoning code. And how it's going to legislatively be controlled is something that council will have to look at. But putting guidelines as an appendices to a zoning code is not been done before. I have talked to many communities. They have guidelines, and council has said, we are requiring these guidelines to apply to, I'll pick Chagrin Falls. Okay, they have it on residential and commercial, and they have to go to the Architectural Review Board. Now, I will say, just because I've been talking to somebody that goes to those meetings on a regular basis, that they still usually will grant certain conditions if they can show that that condition has been done elsewhere. But they still have to get the equivalent of a certificate of appropriateness from us. Okay. But it doesn't necessarily, it's just like any of our other boards and commissions. You can give them quasi-judicial authority to determine what can and cannot be done in the overlay district, but you also can not make it strict. But what it should not be part of the zoning code, because when it comes to development, we should be able to put them in the sign section, our chapter 9, and they should be able to see that and know that is what they need to do. And then the guidelines should be of such a nature that they get a sense of what we're looking for on an overall feel and look. And whether or not that is something that you want to require a certificate of appropriateness through the ARC board or some other type of format, that is something that we will address once we get closer to having complete design guidelines.
Because I know we had talked about this before. We wanted to have a little bit of teeth in the guidelines, that they're just not suggestions that people can do or not do.
Right. And you can do that. But the one thing I will say is the topics in the guidelines should be the guardrails within which whatever board or authority you're going to use to administer the guidelines One of the things we have is we have that lack of guideline. I actually just did a presentation on the design guidelines on Friday. We have 8 pages defining different architectural styles. Greek Revival, we've all heard that one once or twice, goes through every one of them. All it is a description of those architectural styles. That's it. Those are 8 pages of guidelines. You know how much we have on new construction, of which we just did, what, 150 to 200 million downtown? 3 paragraphs. That's upside down. That's not right, right? There needs to be a balance, and we don't have that right now. So the guidelines we have more explanatory information. There's also another 2 pages on how the design guidelines were established. They talk about the historic, and again, we do not have a historic district, so that in itself is another challenge. So there's the guidelines we have currently are not really guidelines that say specifically we want to see on the exterior more natural materials than we want to see, you know, painted hardy board. Okay, that's a guideline, right? We want to see more natural materials. Okay, they want to see stone, they want to see brick. We want to see more glass on the first floor than we do on the, you know, that's a guideline that can be tangible. A developer can look at that, or a business owner can look at that and understand what that means. We do not have that currently in our guidelines. But we have a lot of sections on defining things. And that's not what guidelines need to be.
And any more, Tracy? Okay. Any other questions or any more comments from council? Anyone in the audience? Yes. Come on up.
Please email me comments if you guys take the time to look at these. Thanks.
I've read them too many times.
Hi.
Yeah, I think I'm supposed to ask you for your name and address,
Yeah,
please, for
Bridget
the record.
Tipton, 458 West Main Street. So I'm on the Architecture Review Board and the Main Street Kent Design Committee. So I'm pretty invested in the outcome of this document. So I'm really glad that the majority of the conversation is around the enforcement of this guideline, because it's critical. Like, there's been a lot invested into this, and at the moment, without a legislative way that you all intervene, it is not very useful to the board, to the public. So that link that's currently not figured out is extremely important, and it's my understanding that it's coming. It's your decision. So it's really, really important. A couple of other kind of like overarching concerns that I have with the document is that as Bridget laid out, the current guidelines, I really don't enjoy them. I find them very difficult to use. I've used them as a designer on projects within the overlay district. Very difficult to apply. On the board, very difficult to enforce or even make reasonable recommendations to change. So I'm really glad this process is happening. The current document, the pendulum has swung so far in the other direction. The notes there are a lot of notes about this, but the word history isn't in the document. And, you know, I'm a contemporary designer. I own a very, very, very old building. So I'm kind of straddling both worlds of new construction and adaptive reuse, so I can appreciate everything kind of about the whole industry. But it's, even for me, I'll say, it's swung so far in the opposite direction of abandoning history. It is difficult, I understand, to kind of identify which buildings are going to be protected due to their age versus how we address new construction. This document doesn't do that. It doesn't make an enforceable recommendation for either case with any kind of strength or the ability to enforce any of it. So that's an overarching problem still with this document. It's a similar critique of what I have of the current document. It's just not enforceable enough, which again is a big problem with this one. And I do think that without the link of how it's actually being applied and enforced, I don't know why anybody would even look at this. So the guidelines, I do think, need to move more in the direction of regulations. It's leaving too much up to chance, I think. It's leaving too much up to interpretation as a suggestion, even if a certificate of appropriateness is tied to this and it is a required step in the process. It still is a little too unenforceable. There are a lot of good items that are enforceable in a way that there just isn't in the current document, but as a whole it's just not there yet, which is good that it's just a draft. The second thing is that there's a really big shift in the spirit of the document from individual buildings to public realm, or we could say urban fabric, and it's kind of de-emphasizing the significance of individual buildings, which make up the whole, and if we don't value the individual thing, the whole will not amount to much either. I do appreciate it does emphasize the pedestrian, which is good, but for the most part, the people coming to us aren't designing the streetscape. Yes, the building and the sidewalk interact, but it is de-emphasizing in some ways the individual building, which I think is important because it's meant to be reviewed at the architectural level, and that is what the board, I think, could do more of. And there's a lot of emphasis on economic vitality, which is, important. But I do think that the design guidelines and architecture in general is can aspire to more than that. There's an art to it, there's a science to it as well. But I think balancing some of the development emphasis with more this. I'm an architect and interior designer. I'm obsessed with this industry. I care a lot about it, and so to me, the document lacks a little bit of the hope and optimism of what design can do. And that's just kind of in I think some of the language and the tone and things like that. Things that are really hard to edit, and I'm so glad it's not my job to do. And then I think all of the other things about format, audience, things like that, that has been explained enough. There's really a lot of issues with digestibility of the document. That's what I've got.
Okay.
I just leave, right?
Thank you very much, Bridget.
That's funny.
So we don't need any,
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah.
so we're just accepting this, and offering our comments. We don't need to take any action right now, so unless there's anything further, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget.
Health and Public Safety, Business District Noise, Hope? Office.
I started, after we had our last talk about noise in the business district and what council had asked the administration to do as far as trying to come up with regulations or laws that work for everyone. It dawned on me that by the time we all get through vacation and try to sit down, we're going to have a whole summer season of festivals and people wanting to enjoy downtown gone. And so I thought, and I talked to Dave, and I was like, do you think it's worth just prompting another discussion just to see if there is some type of middle ground that we can come to until we can tighten up our code? Because one of the things that Dave and I talked about was how our code talks about the noise isn't allowed to leave the property. When I lived in Cauga Falls, I could probably hear my neighbor's TV 5 doors down because we were all on postage stamp lots. And I don't think for a second that the police department would allow me to sign a complaint. If it was outrageously so, absolutely, I'm sure. But I just think there is possibly something we could do this summer to maybe allow Venice to go back outside. They have nicely gone inside, and they're not going to go outside until this is figured out. But I was just hoping for another stab at the discussion. And my thought was, shoot, where did I put it? I'm sorry. At 10 o'clock, Sundays through Thursdays, and midnights on Friday and Saturdays.
It says 11.
It says 11.
11.
I'm sorry?
You had 11.
We had 11.
I think it is 11. You had 11.
Oh, it says midnight right there.
Oh. Well, we talked about, you can decide.
Yeah.
What we're
I just
saying
wanted
is,
to open this up
we
again.
see
There's
how
a range.
what we're saying, and we did, we talked about midnight, we talked about 11, we talked about 9, because we felt like the point was expectations, managing expectations. And what's not happening now, sort of like Bridget pointed out, both Bridgets pointed out,
the shortcomings of the current design guidelines, we have some shortcomings in our noise ordinance too. And I think it was Garrett that said, hey, look, there's a hard stop at 11 for certain concerts. Yeah. And that stuck with me. Well, maybe we start there. I mean, we can sit in this room and speculate for hours, right? And we can do that with if we form a committee. I mean, she mentioned, I think the food cart probably ended up being a year. Developing that was like over a year. I don't think we need to wait a year. I think, if nothing else, let's stick a flag in the sand and see how it does, and we can adjust that accordingly. I mean, so number one, how do we do better with the expectations? Saying 9 seems a little discordant with the current downtown. And that's why we thought, well, maybe during the weeknights, quote-unquote weeknights, which would be Sunday through Thursday, maybe a 10 o'clock. You could keep that at 9 if you preferred. Or if we could do it for 10 for 6 months and see how it goes this year and try it different next year. But then we said either 11 or 12 probably for the weekends. I think Hope was saying 12 seemed to be more realistic, but I kept saying, well, but Garrett mentioned there's a hard stop on 11 on some other places. So we don't know any more than anybody else, but what we're saying is, with the chief's input too, that if we set the expectation better in terms of the hours, so then residents will know, look, I know I may hear some noise, but it's going to stop at 10 or 11 or 12, whatever that line that you draw. Up till then, if it's inordinately loud, like she said, they can do like they said they've done. They go and they negotiate. Say, hey, look, yes, technically you're allowed to keep playing until 10. But man, if you don't turn it down a little bit, we may have to intervene and do something. So I think, and we don't want to put the police in that, every night noise regulation business, but we're hopeful that maybe if we set these expectations, put it as a pilot, test run it, and we'll reconvene the end of this year, or if things are going poorly, we'll roll back in here before then, if you're getting a bunch of calls. So I feel like maybe the best teacher here isn't us sitting in a room, it may be just trying something differently in the street. So that's the backdrop to this, and unfortunately Heidi's not here. I know this has been an issue that's close to her heart. So that's kind of what we're proposing. It can be 10, 11, 12, even 9 if you like. I don't know if you're okay with that concept, but that's kind of what we're thinking.
Questions? Robin?
Yeah, I'm still wondering, after our last discussion when I asked the chief, there's a law on the books, and a law is not a discretionary application. It is what it is. It's hard. And if in fact, it's one thing to get with the business owners, which I'm all for, to be honest with you. But the complainant is another issue. That individual is looking at the hard rule, which is you can't hear noise 40 feet away or whatever it is. That becomes an application of law. And I'm still questioning if there's no real variance about that as far as I know. Maybe Hope can help me with that, but I thought if somebody wants to then require or move for enforcement, what do we do in cases like that?
So I think that maybe this will help clarify. So anytime someone calls us with a noise complaint, we always ask them prior to going out if they're willing to sign a complaint against the person. If they're willing to sign a complaint, and quite frankly, it doesn't matter what time of day it is. It could be noon. If you're willing to sign a complaint against your neighbor for whatever noise or whoever it is, you're able to do that as a resident. You can sign that complaint yourself. Where it becomes the way the law is applied. So the key word, I think, in the ordinance, and I think Hope will agree with this, is the word reasonableness. If you as a complainant are not willing to sign a charge against the person, then we have to go out and determine the reasonableness of that noise. So that's where things like time of day and level of noise come into play with the officers, is to go out there and make that discretionary call based on the word reasonableness in the ordinance.
Gwen?
So I have a couple of thoughts. For starters, I know that we've got somebody here from Zephyr who I believe at some point would like the opportunity to speak before we make a motion, I'm assuming. I could be wrong, but okay. So based on our discussion last time on this, there were a couple of comments that stood out to me. Garrett's comment about Live Nation shutting down shows at 11 p.m. I thought.
It's 12, actually.
Is it 12? Okay. I thought was very, very interesting, and also John's comments about his experience owning a bar, that people don't generally come out till 9. I don't know if you have any experience with that, Matt, but so that helped. I guess if I'm going to put out my opinion, would be 11 o'clock, and then midnight, Friday night and Saturday night. The reason being that I think it goes along with Garrett and John's comments. Also, my concern is that if it's before 11, there could potentially be, everybody likes an outside show. I think there's a reason they're growing in popularity. So I don't book bands. I don't have any experience with that, but I'm going to make an assumption, and if in the audience, if you want to say that I'm incorrect, that's fine, is that there could be a potentially a greater competition, right? So if we say it's earlier than what kind of the standard of a Live Nation show is, then bands who are coming through might opt to go with a venue that's outside, that they could go up until that, right? So it could give an advantage to venues that are outside, outside of Kent. They could give them an advantage, right? So I'd like to see our live music want to come to Kent because it kind of fits the criteria that they're seeing elsewhere. Also, the reason I feel like 11 on weekdays rather than the 10 is just two reasons. One is that since COVID, there's been a shift in what a weekday is anymore. People have days off. I'm off on Mondays, so Sunday night to me is like, this is great. So that's part of it, is that there's a little bit of a shift with people's ability to take time off, and then also because if bands or entertainment is traveling, they don't always have the luxury they can't only do shows only on weekends. I don't think that would be economically feasible. So they're going to need places where they can perform potentially on a weekday if it fits their schedule. And then just lastly, I think that if we're going to try this, I think we should err on the side of let's try it and see how it works, especially since we retain the ability to retract it or change it should it not turn out the way we would like, or there's still a lot of problems. So I guess I'm a believer in sort of erring in the side of being a little bit more kind of liberal with it based on those things that I stated before, and then always kind of retracting it rather than starting out from a more restrictive point of view. And those are my thoughts on it.
I forgot to mention, can I, to set the context, I asked Bridget and Eric in the Community Development Office, I said, I know there's live music. How much are we talking? It is. We feel like it's an important part of the Kent brand, and we know things like the Blues Festival and things like that. But so Eric did a pretty quick windshield survey, so this is not exhaustive, but this is a list that I'm passing around here of just the dates that we knew about. Thanks to Bridget at the Bell Tower, we got that listed. Again, it's not exhaustive, but it does give you. I mean, candidly, it's a lot. And so I think it speaks to the point that the folks that were in here last meeting, I think primarily from the Zephyr, but we're speaking to, this is what separates Kent from a lot of other places. And so the data seems to vouch for that. I just wanted to share that as background.
Who's doing this?
Tracy.
So when we have the festivals like the Beatle Fest and the Blues Fest and thing, when do those shut down?
Do you know? Like your events?
How late do those go at night?
They go. I mean, they go late. They go past midnight. I mean, there's bands that start
And are there complaints then with those?
Really not.
Most of them are inside.
Aren't those inside?
Most of them are inside.
I mean,
That's February, yeah, but not July.
Yeah.
That's Saturday, all day until, I mean, they program stuff until the bands typically end before midnight, but then there's always something that they plan.
So there's indoor and outdoor
Yeah.
events,
Right.
but
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Tracy?
Well, I like what Gwen had suggested, 11 in the weekdays and midnight. Let's try that out, and like she said, you can always pull it in if we get a lot of complaints.
Further? No? Anybody from the audience? Name and address, please.
You got to come here.
I know.
No, you have to come up to the...
Big Brother has got you now.
Hello. I just wanted to say thank you to the City Council.
I need your name and address, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Matthew Young,
There you go.
112 Portage Street. Yeah, I just want to thank you to the City Council, thank you to Kent PD and the Health and Public Safety Committee for trying to work with us on this. I just did a quick check on my calendar. We've had, since the beginning of the year, 42 concerts at the Zephyr Pub. And I know most of this issue is dealing with us specifically. 11 p.m. on the weekdays and 12 p.m. on the weeknights or weekends is perfect for us. I think that we can definitely work with that and would allow us to do everything that we want to do. I don't think there's any way. The initial language of talking 11 p.m. on weekends, I'm concerned about. The only thing we've done since this issue came up, the only events we've had outside of our drag shows, which have gone past 11 p.m., but we've had no complaints that I'm aware of about them, and I don't want to create a situation where that would start happening. So, I don't know. I've sent you all an email. I sent Gwen an email a month ago, and I think you all got it and read my feelings about this situation. Not only is it really important for like the economic viability of our bar, but also it's really important for the community to have live music, and so I just, yes.
So you're good with 11 on weekdays and midnight on weekends?
That would be wonderful. I think that is an absolute, we can work around that, and it would not affect us in a negative way. Yeah, I think 11 p.m. on weekdays is necessary logistically, because if it was at 10 p.m., it wouldn't really allow me to do much. I would have shows inside and then have to personally dismantle my PA and bring them inside and reset it up if I had multiple bands that night. So, but I can work with that, and I can schedule things earlier, and I'm happy to do that.
Anybody, Mike, I'm sorry.
What is it now? Is it 9? So we're getting complaints about it being at 9, and we're going to let it go to 11. Okay, that doesn't make any sense to me, but we could try it out, I guess, and we'll see where we go.
Further? Anybody else? Are you fit? Heather, name and address, please, for the record.
Heather Malarchik, 7685 Westlake Boulevard. I love it that when we did the DORA, we gave it a 3-month, we did a 90-day trial. And then it was like, oh, that went way better than we thought it would. So I think that's probably what would happen in this instance. Plus, everybody is used to being allowed to be outside enjoying their beverages until 11 o'clock. So ending that fun at 10 would be kind of senseless. Even like the sidewalk cinema, like the movie starts at dark, and then that's noise too. So I think this is definitely worth giving a shot.
Thank you. Anybody else from the audience? Back to council.
I'd like to move to, I'm not sure how to phrase it, help me out, to
well,
set up a trial period?
Yes, and you know what, I think what I will do between now and our next meeting is look at the ordinance and honestly see if I can carve out something. So it's just a trial. Just carve out something so that if your constituents say, well, it says 9, you can go, no, this is a trial ordinance that we're running, and it's going to be these hours. And that also, I think, helps the police because it gives them the guidance they need. Like, where do we go? Do we go to house parties? Does this apply to house parties? I would say no. I would like this to be just the issue that's downtown regarding outside entertainment.
Do we have a downtown entertainment district that we can? No, okay.
No. I'm going to try to look at it if I can. So I would like a motion to allow these changes that we've talked about, and if that needs to be in an ordinance form, you're approving that, of me bringing it in 2 weeks.
Tracy?
Is that going to be okay to have 2 different standards, one for neighborhoods and one for downtown? I mean,
Yes.
So that's okay?
Yes, that's kind of like, a problem with, sometimes if you look at in industrial sections or more commercial sections of town, they'll have different standards than in a residential area or in a business area.
And what are we going to do for 90 days? We going to do like a pilot for 90
Yes,
days?
I sure can.
Okay.
Robin?
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with changing the time frame, but that's almost like, right now, a housekeeping thing, when the major issue is still in my mind. There is a ordinance on the books which does not distinguish downtown from neighborhoods and otherwise. That's just still a huge concern to me. And why that is, I don't know. I was actually surprised when the chief said last week that the ordinance that applies to neighborhoods applies to the downtown. That to me is a big issue, because while we're doing these things, the people who are affected or the complainants can still take people downtown to court. And we as a city are going to be dealing with the enforcement of that. And the issue to me, I have no problem. We're kind of kicking the can down the road a bit, but I have no problem with us doing these things which seem to me to be a little more tangential than actually dealing with the issue of the noise ordinance and how we're going to be enforcing that, and when somebody actually calls our bluff on it. Not us in particular, but they have a business person down there who's doing something, they get a bee in their bonnet. Screw you guys about this is bothering me, and it's on the books that you have to enforce this. Now, whether or not we're going out and making judgments about it, and what's going to happen is a person is going to say, yeah, I want to file a complaint. Just enforce what I'm asking you to enforce that's on the books. I'm more concerned about that and how we end up dealing with it, and not giving this gentleman and other people the belief that ultimately by doing this, they're going to be in some ways exempted or be given this kind of opening to be able to do that. I totally agree with the 11 o'clock, and I believe that expanding for business opportunities is a great thing, and being in a downtown district, you got to expect this, but that's not what the law is. I mean, so at the end of the day, what are we going to do to expedite looking and getting that changed so that these businesses can be able to actually do the thing, and the community. I think it's a tremendous community benefit to be able to do what they're doing, but I'm just saying it's kind of contentious situation for us, and I think we have to look at not just adjusting the timelines, but looking at how we fit our business district into and distinguish the application of the laws between them and neighborhoods, because they're different. But until we do that, I just view that as problematic.
Thanks, Rob. Barrett?
I was just going to ask, why couldn't we just put it right with the Dora district, because it seems to encompass the area that we would, I mean, it's kind of the downtown. That's food for thought, so you don't have to answer.
That's a really good idea, actually, so. Because we have a map for that.
Yeah, we have a map, and it's, if you're going to drink and you listen to music, it's going to be in that area, outside, legally, right? So that was question, comment. That's it.
Roger?
Yeah. No, I was going to say the same thing, but to Robin's point, I think that the issue is, I'll bet we still have open container law on our books in terms of public consumption of alcohol, walking down, but we make a difference with DORA. So I don't see it as a problem if we say that this is for the businesses, or I like the idea of the DORA section because it makes it clear. But I will contend that we have one for part of the town and another for the other part. The issue is we have a residential that, what's your word? Abuts. We have residential that abuts our downtown. And so I think that the bigger issue is that, and I really appreciate our local people coming because I really think they want to work with the neighborhoods. And I think that if you want to come down on 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night, the Central School parking lot is a great place to go down, which I did, and you can kind of get a feel for the ambient noise coming from downtown. And it really isn't as obtrusive as I thought it was going to be, but I could see if there was a real loud band, up on the hill on East Main Street, that would come straight across, and But I think it's something that can be worked out. I could live with the motion that's on the floor, but I really think that it is a slippery slope, and I think Mike had a pretty valid point there. This is a little, but 90 days, let's give it a shot, and I can support it.
Okay. Anybody else?
Do you need me to make a motion that's more...
It's coherent.
It's coherent, thank you. Sorry, it looked like there were more questions. So I didn't make an official motion.
Okay, sure. No, you didn't. We were.
Okay, so if I may, if we're ready for a motion, I'd like to make a motion that the city put together ordinance, thank you, an ordinance for our downtown, noise, to go 11 p.m. weekdays and 12 p.m. Friday and Saturday. 12 a.m. Thank you. Yeah, 12 p.m. Thank you. Yes, 12 a.m. within the Dora district.
Second.
Thank you.
Eric seconds it. Discussion? Tracy?
Do you need a time limit on that? Pilot for 90 days? Sure.
Would you like to amend that?
Do we need a time limit, or is this something
120 days.
I mean, do we need a time limit, or is this something that can come back if it's deemed to be a problem? Do we have to have a dead stop on it? Or?
No, you don't, but I believe that Tracy had suggested that, because it would force you to look at it again, whether it's good or bad.
And that would take care of the summer months. So should I put an amendment on it, or are you just going to put it in your...
I mean, we could do 120 days as an amendment.
That'll give us too much to do.
I'd like to put an amendment to that the trial goes for 120 days.
Okay. So we vote on the amendment first?
Yeah.
So
Okay,
Mike second it. All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So we have the motion has been amended. So yes, as amended. And so what we have, the original motion by Gwen with the amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Bowen.
Takes us to finance.
Ohio Public Works Commission. Big Jim. We got a couple grants here.
Good evening. We're requesting approval to submit for two grants and no interest loans to the Ohio Public Works Commission. One is at the Water Reclamation Facility for primary clarifier number 1 for a total of approximately $380,000. And then the second is to rehabilitate 2 of our water towers, both of which are on Summit Street, and that's for a total of $543,000. This is continuing our efforts to supplement the utility funds.
Questions? I think we all like that. Anyone in the audience that just left? Back to council.
Move to authorize.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you very much.
That was very quick, Jim.
And congratulations on the
Yes.
East Main Street. That was wonderful.
Congratulations.
That great.
Yes,
Keep shooting.
yes, congratulations.
Yeah, that was great, Jim.
First responders.
Great. So I'm back again. I came to you several months ago and requested your approval to accept a grant. It's the American Rescue Plan Act First Responder Wellness Retention and Resiliency Grant. It's through the State Emergency Management Agency. You approved us to accept a grant for $102,000 for first responder wellness several months ago. The granting agency has recontacted us, and they've now reevaluated some of the programs they didn't initially award. And one of the things that they've talked to us about, they haven't officially approved it yet, but they've talked to us about an additional $34,000 that would serve to give us money for first responder recruitment. And it would be split between the police and fire departments. So I'm just requesting your approval to, if awarded, accept the $34,000 for first responder recruitment.
Questions? Okay, nobody in the audience. Do you have a question?
I do. I have a question for you.
We want to just hear you talk.
You hear me struggle. Is it earmarked in any way when it comes to recruitment, or are there any particular ways that you have to use it? Or
It is. So $30,000 of that would be for a firm to help us, to hire a firm to help us with recruitment, and the other $4,000 would be for space at job fairs.
Very cool.
Further questions? Robin?
Yeah. What are your expectations on benefit of that additional resources to recruitment? I mean, what can our expectations be about bringing in more qualified, more diverse kind of workforce?
So generally speaking right now, I mean, yes, obviously I don't think it's any secret that, and we haven't hidden from the fact that we definitely need to have a more diverse workforce. Above and beyond that, right now, and I won't speak for the fire department, but within law enforcement recruiting and retention nationally is at an all-time low. We're seeing right now, for instance, where a police academy or here, not in the city, but around here, just finished, and there were 11 cadets. That's one of few academies in this area. So really the draw to the profession's at an all-time low. So one of the things that we have to realize as a city is to keep up with that, and knowing that exists, we have to rise to the forefront. And one of the ways to do that is just better marketing. So when I talk about bringing a firm in to help us out with recruiting, it's somebody who can find all those points, those key points that we have, that we offer, that really knows the demographic and the makeup of the population and what they're looking for and what they're seeking to help us bring people here.
So the expectation is you'll be able to do, and of course it should be that, greater outreach, identifying certain groupings, that the expectation then should probably be that we will see more diversity in the pipeline. And there are, as Dave pointed out last week, we got other problems regarding having to get ourselves in a position to be able to make people feel that it's worthwhile coming to Kent, but that's another thing. This is seems to be a real excellent opportunity to get outreach better.
Sure, and I absolutely hope that's the case. Like I said, one of the things, and I want to be very clear and transparent with this, one of the things, though, is just the lack of interest. And again, I'm not saying this grant covers all first responders, and I'm not speaking for the fire service because I don't have the knowledge of what they're seeing in terms of recruitment. But I can just speak on the law enforcement side of this. Is just the absolute minimal interest from society and joining this profession. So part of it is, like I said, it's rising to the top. We know that our candidate pool is significantly smaller than it's ever been for jobs across this country in law enforcement. So it's how do we find a way to rise to the top? You know, you think about it this way. It's not always the cheapest or the most expensive product that sells on the market. It's the ones who do the best marketing. So kind of how do we rise to the top of that marketing campaign to help draw interest in bringing people here?
Thank you. Further?
Move to authorize.
Yep, second.
With emergency.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Rhonda, yes.
Here she comes.
Look at all
He's
this
back.
tax budget.
I'm just requesting that council pass and approve the 2024 tax budget that you have in your packet.
And as you recall, I'm sorry, I just want to remind you, she said it best, it really kind of just outlines our expected revenues, a year full operating budget. You guys are all veterans, you know this, but just for the sake of the public that's watching, when you go through your harder budget later in the year, this is required by law to get it submitted to the county. It's the estimate of resources, essentially. So it just lays out what we're expecting is from a resource point of view, and if there's any, for example, levies and so forth that need to change, it would be noted and calculated on there. But there are none, so, all right?
This becomes our first certificate of estimated resources for 2024, of which then we would have to get amended for any additional grants that we're not aware of at this time, or any additional money.
So, questions?
Yeah, Mike.
Oh,
So this is just a report that goes to the county?
Yes.
Does the
And
county send us a report back on their?
They do. They send us something back, and then in January, we'll receive our first certificate of estimated resources, and we can't exceed, our appropriations can't exceed the certificate.
I guess, let me rephrase my question. Does the county send us a listing of their estimated resources also?
Oh, no.
No? Okay.
No.
Further? Anybody in the audience? Back to council.
Move to
Move to authorize with emergency.
Second.
Discussion?
Nobody can hear you.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now you're
Opposed? Yes, I
opposed.
opposed.
Okay, nobody. Now your budget.
This is just to request that council approve the amended budget request sent to the city manager in a memo dated June 26th.
Move to authorize.
Well, I was gonna go through my spiel, but, anybody, discussion?
With the emergency, right?
It's automatic, I think, isn't it? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Let's get
Thank you.
There you go.
Rhonda home.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Okay, the committee meeting is over. We have a special council meeting to approve the budget. So would the clerk read roll, please?
Mr. Amrine?
Here.
Mr. DeLeon?
Here.
Mr. Ferrara?
Here.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Here.
Mr. Sidoti?
Here.
Mr. Turner?
Here.
Ms. Wallach?
Here.
I need an authorization of draft 2023-039.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Would the clerk read draft 2023-039 in title only?
Draft 2023-039, a resolution adopting the tax budget of the City of Canton, Ohio for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2024, submitting the same to the county auditor and declaring an emergency.
Move suspension.
Second.
Would the clerk read roll, please?
Mr. Amrine?
Yes.
Mr. DeLeon?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrara?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Wallach?
Yes.
Move adoption.
Second.
Comments? Would the clerk read roll?
Mr. Amrine?
Yes.
Mr. DeLeon?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrara?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Wallach?
Yes.
Resolution 2023-039 is passed.
Okay. We need an executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official. Would the clerk read roll?
Can we get a second?
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Mr. Amrine?
Yes.
Mr. De Leon?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrara?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Turner? Ms. Wallach?
Yes.
Okay. Have give a 5-minute break here, and then we will come back.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. But hot night out there.
I heard, too. There was talk.
It's not dark yet.
And they were willing
There you go, Bridget.
sell it. I think Howard was interested in trying to broker a deal.
You better be careful out there. I mean, that, that neighborhood, it's...
Yeah.
Oh, you're staying. Oh, you can see how the inner
Looking at
workings
it,
are.
but, no,